Welcome and thank you for joining today's Market Surveillance Committee meeting. Before we begin, please ensure you have opened the participant and chat panel by using the associated icons on the bottom right corner of your WebEx. Please note that all audio connections are in listen-only mode. To indicate that you wish to ask a question, click the raised hand icon located on the bottom right of the participant panel. If you are not logged into WebEx and instead dialing, you can dial *3 and that will place you in the question queue. Please note that there will be no in-chat questions. If you require technical assistance, please send the chat to me, your host. With that, I'll turn the conference over to Dr. Ben Hobbs, Chair of the Market Surveillance Committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ahmed. Hi, everybody. I'm Ben. Welcome to the meeting of the Market Surveillance Committee, where we're going to be considering the adoption of opinion on the Order 831 modifications for the summer of 2024. With me are Doctors Scott Harvey and Jim Bushnell, members of the Market Surveillance Committee. And we also have in the virtual room Sylvie Spewak, Danny Johnson, Katie Wickler, Guillermo Bautista Alderete, Amelia Blank, Shami Davis, and Becky Robinson from the ISO. And I'm sure that we'll be also hearing from them because I'm anticipating a lot of discussion and questions between us and the stakeholders that they'll be able to help with. The order of business today is that, as usual, we'll take questions and comments about any matter, although I'll ask you to, if it's about the opinion and the soft cap proposal, I ask you to please hold those comments until after the presentation that we'll make. So after public comments, then I will summarize the opinion, some of the major points that we make, and Jim and Scott will also make some comments. And then we'll be open to the phone lines for any questions or comments that the attendees might have. So to begin with, I welcome anybody to raise their hand and join the queue for making a comment or question about any other matter, anything else that you would like to address. So Ahmed, can you open up the phone lines?
We have one raised hand. We have one raised hand from Michelle Keto.
Okay, great. Michelle, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Michelle Keto from the Energy Division at the CPUC. So I have two questions, one of which is, this is slightly related to, but not exactly. So threaded throughout the opinion was a discussion. I think I saw 4 instances where you talked about a software flaw that affected the market last July, and that's the first I'm hearing about this. And so I'm wondering if you're going to be talking more about this in the discussion that's upcoming, or if this is the subject of something else, and whether and how we can find out more information about what happened and whether it's been fixed and whether it's a reliability issue and how CAISO intends to address it this summer. That's my first question.
Thanks, Michelle. I think this is something that a topic that we actually talked about, interacted with you before at previous meetings. It's not directly on topic, but Scott or Jim, is there anything that you want to say about that?
Michelle, we think this is related to the question you raised in the last meeting about, the CAISO's treatment of Western EIM bids and the FMM and transfer imports. So it's all wrapped up, we think, and you requested a discussion of that, and we're willing to do that. And we discuss the transfer limitation. We ought to discuss how the software issue fits into that and was resolved and what implications that has.
Okay. So there's something, I understand that the advisory transfers didn't show up and that CAISO stopped including them in the market for reliability purposes, but I guess I didn't really understand that there was a sort of an adjunct software issue. So it would be helpful to understand that and whether that has been fixed and has any implications for what I was discussing, which is limiting the WEAM transfers in the HAS process. So, okay, that's all I needed for that one. And I guess my second question was whether we were going to talk about the WEAM advisory transfers at some point in time. So that was it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Let me just ask if there's anybody from the ISO staff would like to address the question of any software issue and what's been, if anything has been done about that, if you know what we've been referring to.
Hi, Ben. This is Guillermo. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. I think it would be useful to be more precise about the specific event because, yes, we did have some issues depending on the different points in time, and they were socialized through the different efforts of the market analysis that we have reported. If we're referring to the 2023, there were indeed three major items that we discussed impacting the solution of the market. If there is something else that is not in the scope of these three specific items that we discussed in the July report, I would be happy to provide more details.
I think the issue, Guillermo, that we talked about was the forward and the advisory intervals of the FMM and RTPD were not accounting for battery reserve requirements. So those battery reserve requirements didn't appear until the binding interval, and maybe other things related to that, which made it look like we had lots of supply when we didn't. And, that seems to me to be related to, I don't think you knew about that when you wrote the July report. So a lot of the, it's unclear in my mind what of the interpretations that were in the July report of events are accurate, or were just the capacity was disappearing when we got to the binding interval because we had not been recognizing the reserve, the regulation and other reserve requirements in the advisory intervals.
Okay, yes, thank you for the references. Do you want me to answer now, or is that going to be part of the discussion later?
I think Michelle wants to have a discussion of that at some point, and it's related to the transfer restriction, which was put in response to the events in July. But part of the problem in July was this software bug. And, it's not clear to me, as I've indicated, how much of the problem was just the software bug and whether there was some other issue beyond that we can understand when the operators think everything's okay, and then all of a sudden they get to the binding interval and they've got a big problem. That would be disconcerting. And, everything that's happened since then is sort of affected by our interpretation is affected by what were the operators doing after that, given this bug? And did you continue to see this, or was it only on the very high load days? But of course, now we're interested in high load days. So, I think it's a subject to discuss, and it's related to, load conformance and the EIM transfer issue and how you're going to do exceptional dispatch this summer are all wrapped up in what you've done to fix that flaw, and if it's fixed or if you've got some ad hoc adjustment. And I think that goes to Michelle's question about, it's all wrapped up in Michelle's question about what is the plan for restricting transfers this summer?
So Guillermo, if there's something to the point that you can, to the question that Michelle asked about a software bug, whether there was something and it is corrected or is not corrected. If it's, a very elaborate discussion with all the aspects that Scott talked about, we can defer that till another time, maybe have an agenda item on that at a separate meeting.
I think Michelle wanted a full discussion of what the CAISO plans to do, and I'm sure the CAISO isn't prepared to do that on the fly, so.
Yeah, well, what I could meet is if that is appropriate, we can put a dedicated item in the upcoming Market Performance Forum meeting, and that would be a good place and time to be able to put all the pieces together. And this is a complex item, it's not just one isolated issue, and reference and context is important. So I'm afraid in 2 minutes I will not be able to provide that.
Okay. Michelle, I hope that's satisfactory that Guillermo is proposing that it be put on the agenda of the market performance meeting, and it be addressed in its full gory glory at that point. Okay, Ahmed, is there anybody else on the phone line?
There are currently no more raised hands.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going to proceed then to a summary of the draft opinion. We've been asked to comment on the ISO's proposal to revise offer rules of the summer of 2024 for battery storage and hydropower resources under FERC Order 831. There's also, I understand the proposal also addresses proxy DR. We won't be talking about that. In the beginning of the proposal, we summarize a little bit of the history of the Order 831 and the details, the calculations, the resources to which the soft cap rules are applicable. We emphasize there that the inability of storage to fully reflect opportunity costs associated with future prices is one important reason for earlier than optimal discharge of the resources in some circumstances, but it's not the only reason. The implication of that being that when the reasons are complicated, they won't be able to be corrected this summer, but at least the ISO can make a start on some of them. So the root of the opportunity cost problems is that Order 831 was adopted by FERC before there was really any battery capacity in the US. And the order didn't focus on temporal opportunity cost of resources with short-term energy limits. It focused more on opportunity costs arising from adjacent markets, adjacent geographic markets at the same time. So the current ISO market design for managing dispatch over the day for energy limited resources has several unresolved issues. Most are not related to Order 831 and can't be addressed this summer or even next winter, mainly for technical reasons dealing with the complexity of modifying the market software. So the proposed changes can't resolve all these problems, but we think that they will help improve management of storage and hydropower on very tight supply days during which Order 831 is triggered. Maybe we won't need those capabilities this summer or next winter, but in case they are, we think that they should be in place. So in particular, the combination of tightening supply-demand balance in the West in an ISO resource mix that has more batteries than previously means that the coincidence of a low hydro year, the occurrence of a low hydro year will result in less margin to compensate for market design flaws, and we want to be prepared for that. We don't want to be depleting the available supply of energy limited resources before the hours in which they are most needed. So the basic flaws are that there are limitations on bidding that prevent prices from rising to appropriate scarcity levels during times when load is in risk of curtailment, as during the events in 2022 through 2024, as we described extensively in Section 3 and the ISO has described in their reports. Another issue is the restrictions in real-time storage offers that could prevent those offers from fully reflecting opportunity costs, such as the inability to revise them less than an hour and a quarter ahead of the RTD market. And so a resource owner or operator may see higher prices than anticipated coming, but cannot adjust offers in the nearer term, the next 75 minutes, to reflect that. And so may be drained before, or largely drained before anything can be done. And additionally, as we emphasized in our ESDR 4 opinion a handful of years back, the temporal horizon of the real-time market software is too short to endogenously estimate the opportunity cost of energy, considering the full cycling time of resources and how they'd be optimally charged and discharged over that cycle. That's the difference between real time and day ahead. The day ahead market can, especially if there's some look ahead beyond the day in question, can endogenously estimate these opportunity costs and optimally schedule storage without the need of opportunity costs bids and offers. There's still some issues there, but the real time with a horizon on the order of an hour or two rather than 24 hours is a different matter entirely. So the result can be systematic underestimation of the value of stored energy and premature discharge of energy prior to when it would be most valuable to serve load. These inefficiencies have led to appreciably higher system costs than necessary in some days, and under tight system conditions, they could endanger system reliability. We hope that it won't, but it definitely could. And we agree with the ISO that this situation needs to be addressed to the extent feasible this summer. Therefore, the ISO's consideration of reforms to the Offer A31 soft cap system, we believe, is timely. Those reforms are necessarily restricted in scope because of what changes in software are possible, but some things can be done which we believe will help. So as we discuss in the fourth section of our opinion, these problems cannot be addressed by the current mix of out-of-market actions, such as self-scheduling or maintaining a target end-of-hour charge or exceptional dispatch by ISO operators, or physical withholding by the resource operators themselves. We conclude after looking at each of these that none of these tools by themselves are sufficient to address the problem, and some change is needed in the soft cap system. Okay, as we describe in section 5, we agree with the ISO that some changes are needed, and we describe those there. We also agree with the ISO that it shouldn't try to apply a design to modify the soft cap that would increase the offer cap across the Western EIM in just particular hours, or to shape that increase over the hours. The ISO has indicated that it actually couldn't apply those kind of nuance changes this summer, and furthermore, it doesn't appear to us that they would be a good idea for any summer, and certainly would need more discussion, which we anticipate may happen in 2025 or 2026, which is a time frame over which some of the other issues can be addressed. Turning to section 6, we think that the changes that the ISO proposes for this summer won't undermine local market power mitigation, nor will they correct the flaws of the existing local market power mitigation design, which now undermine the use of energy limited resources to meet load, things like the calculation of the DEB. We agree with stakeholders that the fundamental flaws in application of local market power mitigation energy limited resources need to be corrected, particularly in the context of the resource mix that we're now seeing in the West, which is more and more energy limited. Those flaws, though, are not going to be, it's not going to be possible to correct those this summer because of basically technical reasons that the software can't be the software changes would be too complicated to have confidence that they would work as intended. In that section, we also recommend that additional data be reported in the future on the impact of local market power mitigation on battery price offers and operations. That would inform discussions of further reforms in subsequent years, 2025 and afterwards, to the Order A31 soft caps that might be considered. We also conclude that the market price impacts of raising the offer cap for storage won't necessarily increase average prices, because we're anticipating that that storage would be used more effectively to avoid curtailment of load and to improve efficiency in the market. And so, in fact, market prices may be lowered. That's That stated with not complete confidence, we're saying that might be the case. Although there are a number of other possible improvements to the way that resource operators in the ISO manage energy limitations of batteries and other energy limited resources such as proxy demand response, there are a number of these that can't be implemented this summer. This does not change the need to make the changes which the ISO believes it can implement by this summer. Our concluding section is section 7. We briefly summarize the overall benefits that we think the proposed design would provide, but summarize several particular ways in which the proposal's ability to correct the efficiency problems are limited. The changes will not address potential for batteries be drained of their state of charge before they can adjust their offer prices. They won't address the potential for battery offer prices to be subject to inappropriate local market power mitigation that causes them to be dispatched despite high offer prices. And moreover, the changes that might mitigate the impacts of excessive load conformance adjustments and erroneous exceptional dispatch, maybe the changes will help mitigate some of the impacts. It will not eliminate those, and those limitations will need to be addressed in subsequent initiatives next year or beyond. Finally, section 7 closes with some discussion of several other concerns and questions. One such concern is the interaction of higher offer caps with reliability demand response and the prices at which it's offered, which we believe that it's possible to change those to, and the changes, the ability to offer storage at a higher price will help to prevent inefficiently early discharge of storage by triggering RRDR earlier. Another concern is whether there should be changes to day-ahead market offer caps. And the proposal does include a change of that. We, however, don't see a clear need to raise the offer cap for batteries in the integrated forward market. As we've pointed out in prior opinions relating to storage resources, the IFM solves the allocation of battery charging over a 24-hour cycle and efficiently calculates opportunity costs within the day. There is an issue at the end of the day, although advisory intervals in subsequent days will help with that. So that's one place where we disagree with the proposal. We would rather see the extension of the raising the soft offer cap to day-ahead offers by batteries be considered next year rather than now. Another issue is the concern expressed by some stakeholders about potential scarcity that could be created in real time as a result of price-taking exports and HASP, which has been alluded to in the discussion we just had with Michelle. We believe that this is less of a problem than some stakeholders suggest, but its potential impact is related to decisions by the ISO operator regarding EIM transfers, and we expect to be discussing that in the future. The final issue discussed in the opinion concerns bid cost recovery for storage resources. As you know, that we had last month an extensive discussion of why there was something like $27 million of bid cost recovery in November of last year. What are the factors that are leading to that? And Scott discussed in his presentation a number of hypotheses that should be explored. The 6 changes for this summer will not address those issues for storage, and nor other BCR issues that might arise if ISO operators wind up relying heavily on exceptional dispatch to manage stressful conditions this coming summer. So with that, I will pass the mic over to either Scott or Jim if either of you would like to elaborate on any of these points or raise other points, and then we'll turn to the phone lines. So Scott or Jim, anything you want to add at this point?
Maybe I'll just elaborate a little bit on the opportunity cost of batteries. I think that some of the stakeholder comments and other discussion is a little bit confused on the role of opportunity cost. And I think Ben explained the point, but just to try to make it more explicit, if we had $1,800 imports coming in hour 19, and we could meet those imports, eliminate those imports by shifting storage of batteries from not discharging earlier in the day to discharging in that hour and displacing the $1,800 or part of the $1,800 imports, the IFM would do that. And the opportunity cost of batteries would be set by those $1,800 imports, and no one would have to guess that those $1,800 imports would be on the margin, because the IFM would look at it and solve it, and there's no guessing involved. The whole reason we need to do this in real time, as Ben said, is because we don't look ahead. So when you're talking about having a high offer cap, high offers in day ahead market, it's to completely withhold the output from the day ahead market. And we don't see a compelling reason to do that at prices above 1,000. We think we can see some reason at the end of the day not to discharge yourself down to zero for $50 or 20 cents or something, but we don't see a reason to have a high value. Now, in the future, in a couple of years, when we have major hydro producers in EDAM, then we'll have to think about this. And we'll have to think about, well, they might have a need to manage their hydro system over, if we're going into several cold days, we might need to look ahead and set high reservation prices. But we need a different approach anyway, because the current design is based on the prices for the next day, the same day as the day ahead market. We're not setting the cap based on prices in the day after that, the day after that. So this is something we need to think about in any case. It's something we have to do, but we're not ready to set that design this year. And we don't have the EIM hydro in the IFM for a couple more years, so we can take time to think about an appropriate way to do it. So that's the only point I wanted to elaborate on, Ben.
Thank you, Scott. Jim?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple more points on there. I guess, if you look at how the steps for implementing 831 were put in place, the logic for cost verification was using DEBs, which was basically how the CAISO thinks about cost verification for everything, default energy bids. And DEBs, just because back before 831, everything was capped at 1,000. DEBs were mechanically capped at 1,000. And so people didn't really think about what if a DEB, which is theoretically a cost verified bid, was actually above 1,000. But 831 is about implementing things above 1,000. And there's just sort of this logical disconnect between using a formula that cuts itself off at 1,000 for periods where the whole purpose of the calculation is to allow bids above 1,000. And so, if this had been kind of thought through back even when 831 was first processed and implemented, I'm not sure the logic of capping DEBs at 1,000 would have been supported even back then. Now, in the case of gas units, there's this workaround in terms of the sort of quick way to try to change that, and it's just not in place for storage and hydro units. All conceding that the DEBs for hydro and storage units are far from perfect. It is sort of the process we have, and it doesn't seem obvious why they should be or ever been capped at 1,000 during a period when the whole point of the exercise is to allow offers above 1,000. So that's half of this proposal is basically about addressing that kind of logical inconsistency. The other thing I'll add is that the magic of 1,000, it's not a magical number, and it's been 1,000 for a long time. If it were inflation adjusted, it would probably be a lot higher. I did a quick calculation of $1,000 in 2017 is about $1,400 in 2017 dollars today. And so just that alone, I just want to sort of center discussions around, especially penalty parameters, that sort of holding on to the sacredness of 1,000 is not. I don't see a big. There's a strong economic logic as to why 1,000 was ever the right number. Certainly is less the right number now than it was at one point. And yeah, I think we make reference to this, but there have been issues in terms of the shaping of loads. There's a couple issues there. One is that the MIBP, this index, well, this adjustment of the index to try to shape Western block prices to look like hourly prices that fit the CAISO's hourly logic. We do think that the implementation should be adjusted so that the idea is that you're taking a specific Western average and you want that same average to be preserved, but just shaped across different hours. And the other point of that, though, is that right now that shaping is very CAISO-centric. And so there is a concern that by using the CAISO's shape, we're sort of shoehorning that timing onto other parts of the market where it really could matter. And so we do make, it's kind of buried amongst many other things, but we do make the point that in terms of trying to shape these prices for caps in other parts of the EIM, we probably should be using something like EIM shapes or any other information we can get that would be more representative of the hourly trajectory of prices in other parts of the West that aren't California. I'll leave that at that.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, so I see already a couple people in line, Alva and Michelle. So Ahmed, we're ready to go to the phone lines. And we can go ahead and welcome Alva.
Alva, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for
Good
this.
morning.
Thanks for your description of the opinion. It's a long one, so I haven't been able to read the whole thing yet. But I had 3 comments based on what each of you has said. I think Jim's argument on the question of the DEBs is a strong one, just in terms of how FERC 831 is phrased. I don't think that necessarily pertains to the second part of the proposal. And on the question of opportunity costs and whether this should only be day-ahead or real-time, I would point out there are a couple of ways in which the real-time costs do go back into the day-ahead market. One is through convergence bids, but there's also a real opportunity cost for somebody who expects to be discharged in the day-ahead market at 1,000 and then have to potentially buy it back at a higher price the following day in real time. So there is a real opportunity cost between day-ahead and real time, which, if the prices are not consistent, is going to be a concern here, at least. The main point I want to make, though, was I think a lot of the way you phrased it, Ben, was in terms of fairly speculative, statements. In other words, there's a lot of uncertainty about whether a lot of the points of the argument are true or not. I think the thing I'd like to hear from you that would be most compelling is to understand why you believe that the existing means are simply not adequate for reliability, because I think that does lend an urgency to an effort like this. But obviously the tools that are in place were stated to be adequate. As late as last summer, there was an entire initiative about the whole state of charge exceptional dispatch, which said that this would replace the minimum state of charge and it would give the CAISO the capability to deal with exactly this issue. So maybe if you can go make that argument strongly, it will be the most convincing to me, as opposed to the question of whether, there are risks, there are potential rewards, there's lots of stuff that may or may not happen. I don't see a mathematical path through that whole argument that compels me to say that the setting the bid limit to the fourth highest MIBP is a mathematically valid way of dealing with this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alva. So, I'll mention a couple of points that we described further in the opinion, and well, first apologize for the length, and then only providing this 30 hours before the call. We realize that that people have other things to do the day, during the day than read lengthy opinions. We have in the past said that our 20-page opinions are too long, and we're not going to have 20-page opinions anymore. And so that now means it looks like it means now 40-page opinions. But that's because the issues in history are complicated, and there's a lot to explain. And we're happy to discuss that now, Alva. So as one example of why we think existing tools are inadequate, so we're talking about on the order of 10 to the 2, 100, or in the near future, hundreds of storage resources that the operators would, if they were managing with exceptional dispatch, would have to coordinate. And these resources won't, they're not all their state of charge is not going to be moving up and down necessarily in lockstep. And it's just simply, we believe that's just simply going to be unreasonably complicated to expect that the operators will be able to manage that efficiently. So we have the whole section, I believe it's section 4, that's devoted to this. Scott or Jim, would you like to discuss any of the other examples of why we think that the existing tools are inadequate?
I guess I'll comment a couple things. First off, a lot of our uncertainty about the benefits is we don't know if 831 is going to trigger this summer. It could be that this is going to be a nice school summer, everything is great, and none of this has to be used. So that we don't know how important this is going to be, but it could be a hot summer, and then it's going to matter. And the existing tools, and remember in September 6/22, we had to arm load to get through the peak because we depleted the batteries too much in the earlier hours. So this is an issue. We don't know, we got a problem in managing it. And the operators are using exceptional dispatch. They started using it too late. I think in our discussion, we think the ISOs are consistently using it too late, all the out-of-market actions, because they're waiting too long. And if you wait too long, you're taking the out-of-market actions when it's already too late, when you're just depleting one battery to charge another, and that does not maintain reliability. And as Ben said, we're getting more and more of these units. And we talked about the issue in some of the discussion doesn't seem to focus on what exceptional dispatch is. It isn't just raising people's offer a little bit, like the way the market participant would do when he saw that the battery is being depleted. It takes all those low-cost batteries and offers and moves them to the top. It moves them up to $2,000. And the CAISO's got to play the piano on how many of those it moves to the top and how many it leaves to balance load, or we're going to get power balance violations. And we talked in the opinion, and we don't know exactly what happened, but it sure looks a lot like on August 16, 2023, maybe what happened during hour ending 17 is the CAISO PD'd too many batteries, and we ended up going to the bid cap as a result because we didn't leave enough. And it's hard. It's putting the CAISO's operators in a real tough position. If on the one hand, they leave the batteries offers low, then they get drained. And then the only option they've got is not to raise it $200 or $300 or $400, but to raise it to $2,000, which is what exceptional dispatch does. And
I think of exceptional dispatch as the actual holding of state of charge.
Right, it holds it at a penalty price of $2,000, Alva. That's what I think stakeholders haven't absorbed. And so that stuff is not available. And when they say, okay, they're making a guess because they don't know exactly how much the solar production is going to be. They don't know what the wind production is going to be. There are a lot of things they don't know, and it's going to bite them because if they put in this inflexible offer, they're playing with fire because they don't really know. Looking forward, the forecast for solar is not a given. We don't know it. We don't know exactly what the wind is going to be. And we've got the load varying all across the Western EIM. And to ask the operators to make a really fine-tuned guess on how much batteries they should put at 1,000 versus leave at the low offer prices is asking a lot.
Your arguments are very strong. I think I was not, and I'm still not convinced that this hold state of charge exceptional dispatch results in those kinds of prices. My impression was that there was a counterfactual that would be run, but that exceptional dispatch would not necessarily affect prices in the way you're saying. But that's that needs to be looked at. I need to look at that. And then the other point was, so basically just to, and I think another strong point you're making, which I was not, and it'd be good if the CAISO also agreed with you, is that the exceptional dispatch hold state of charge tool was used essentially last August, and you're saying it was not used successfully, because we were given the impression when this change was made in the market that there was more than just a unilateral exceptional dispatch capability, that there was an actual tool, in other words, a portfolio look at the batteries that underlay the exceptional dispatch hold state of charge, and that the CAISO would be using that tool in managing system conditions. And what you're saying is, no, that's not the case. So I think,
Well, even if they have a tool,
those are both
though,
strong points.
It's even if they have a tool, the tool does not have perfect foresight. And I'm saying it's a really razor edge situation the CAISO is put in, where they've got to take these low bids and they can't raise them a little bit so that they get buffered if their solar forecast is off or their wind forecast is off. They've got to put it to 2,000.
Again, I don't
That's
necessarily
why I
think
see
you're
the advantage of some of those batteries raising their bids from 1,000 to 1,200 instead of being put to 2,000 to give us a little more flexibility.
Okay.
You know, there are lots of things that can be done better with more time, but I just think that we need, and the CAISO hasn't talked. You can see the data in the CAISO's reports about the number of resources being ED'd in that hour and the number of megawatts, but the CAISO didn't really discuss why the prices spiked, you know, during that hour, and when they had the ED in effect. And it kind of looks to us like maybe that's what happened. And if it is, it's a caution. And maybe there was something else, but all of this, even September 6th, when you look back at why did the prices spike so early in the day, it looks like there's a lot of things going on, the constraints binding that created separation between the EIM East and the CAISO that triggered the draining. You know, it's asking a lot for the batteries, for the battery operators and the ISO to have perfect foresight on that.
Yeah, but if anything goes wrong with this, they'll still have to use exactly the same tools. If they're confronting the situation, they'll have to use.
Right, but
exactly the same tools.
having instead of having to raise the prices to 2,000, having some at 1,200 is better, we think. And we agree this isn't going to solve everything. I think Ben beat that horn, the opinion beat that horn a lot of times, and there are other changes that are important, but they're not going to get done this summer.
And again, I'm not convinced dispatch causes any bid prices to be increased to $2,000, but I'd welcome clarification from that on.
Well, regardless of the mechanics of whether the exceptional dispatch constraint mechanically triggers a scarcity price, I think you would agree that it has the effect of withdrawing supply from the market.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the aim of this
so that's going to raise prices.
That's the aim of this change as well, is to give batteries an opportunity to hold back some portion of their supply because of the risk in the peak hours. I understand that.
Yeah, and
I'm trying to understand the need for the additional measure. And I think Scott has explained that, at least in terms of how he understands exceptional dispatch working. I understand now your argument, at least. So I'm not certain that it actually works that way, but I understand the argument. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll just add on the DEBs versus the fourth highest MIBP. You know, in the way we've thought about this, and I know it's not exactly the current proposal, would be that the battery changes would not apply to day ahead. And my understanding of the battery DEBs is that they're linked to the day ahead prices. And so that becomes problematic in real time if you don't have this alternative way of setting the battery DEB prices.
Agreed.
And so those pieces fit together in that way.
The other thing is that usually these issues are when real time is worse than we expected day ahead. I mean, frankly, that's when we're going to get into raising the offers, and then something based on 110% of the fourth highest in the day ahead is off point. You know, it's fine for some days, but not on the really stressed days, because it's probably because things are not going well.
We don't have data for a large number of days to know whether that's, would in fact be the case in terms of the relationship of the fourth highest price to day ahead prices. On the stressful days, it could be that the actual fourth highest price in real time is much higher. So one other point that we allude to, Al, is that Scott talks about kind of the razor edge or knife edge nature of the blunt tool. I know that's a contradiction to say it's knife edge and blunt, but it is a blunt tool of exceptional dispatch, and that in the longer term, of course not for the summer, is that allowing offers to be state of charge dependent would definitely allow things to react more smoothly. And and this is not being contemplated now, but we've talked about in the past the having intraday markets with much longer time horizons would also be a much more fundamental way to deal with these problems than more ad hoc way of exceptionally dispatching of operators having to juggle those things.
Thank you.
I don't know if we've gotten. Go ahead.
I was going to say thank you for the 40 pages, even if they can't really be absorbed for this particular urgency. I think, as you say, this is a continuing piece of work, and so I think your contributions will be very useful as we move forward. Thank you.
I hope that's the case. Thank you, Alva, for the compliment. I think the next person in line is Michelle.
Hey, it's Michelle. I don't want to be the A student, but I did get through all 40 pages last night. So,
You always sat in the front of the class, I'll bet.
Yeah.
And
So,
raised your hand.
So first of all, I just wanted to follow up on Alva's point, and I would note that CAISO, when they asked for the extension of the minimum state of charge for last summer, they did say that the enhancements, the enhanced exceptional dispatch, they said these enhancements will include new tools for CAISO operators to monitor and manage storage resources state of charge, and new tools for CAISO operators to issue exceptional dispatches for storage resources to change to or hold a specific state of charge. Today, these are slow, cumbersome processes for CAISO operators, effectively requiring them to call each storage resources scheduling coordinator and communicate what the CAISO needs for reliability. The new enhancements will help automate and streamline this process. Altogether, these enhancements will give CAISO operators the tools they need to be comfortable with the retirement of the MOC state of requirement. So I just want to note that CAISO did say that this was going to automate the process and that they were comfortable getting rid of the minimum state of charge. So I just want to say that point. And then the other point I want to make about this is that what you're essentially asking is for the 500 storage resources, whose bids were very variable to ensure our reliability. So if you look at how these resources were bidding on August 16th, they were bidding all over the map. So there is no guarantee that if we give them the ability, we discharged them because they weren't at 1,000. They were at well below 1,000 during those times that you were concerned about. We give them the ability to go to 2,000. There's no guarantee that the right number are going to be sitting at 1,200 or 2,000. So I do wonder whether we think that the market solution will give us a market solution. It will not ensure our reliability. So I just want to make that point. So I've got so many other points and questions. So I absolutely agree that we shouldn't do this in the day ahead market. And I also think it could have a lot more unintended consequences. And I think that I just want to say that my concern is not, well, actually, let me go back to Order 831. So the purpose of Order 831 was to have a soft cap of 1,000, and then the sort of quid pro quo to address market power is if you go above 1,000, you have to cost justify, right? So for gas units, we know how they justify. They actually give you their heat rate, they give you their gas price, and we can go above 1,000, and that's totally great. And I would note that in most circumstances we have not done that. So we don't break 1,000 because gas is expensive, and that's fine if we do. So now what Order 831 said is you have to cost justify above 1,000 to address market power. FERC also said that we can allow opportunity costs. So my concern here is that I think we can all agree that what we're putting in are not real opportunity costs. For all the reasons you guys said, there's geographical diversity, there's price separation, and I think we can agree that $2,000 is not, between the hours of 4 and 9 p.m. for a 4-hour battery, is not the opportunity cost. And so my real concern here is that we're going to bring this to FERC. FERC's going to say it's just and reasonable, but it's not an opportunity cost. And if it was a real opportunity cost, I have no objection. But what it is it's an administratively determined price based on a thinly traded bilateral index that we then shape from yesterday's price. And it's not the real opportunity costs, right? If it's day, because in the 4th hour at 9 p.m., 2,000 cannot be their opportunity cost, right? So that's my concern about implementing something like this in such a quick fashion, is that we give cover to something that has no basis. So, okay, that's my high level concern about this. I mean, look, if we went in and said, this is the least bad option, and it is not just and reasonable, that's very different than saying this is an opportunity cost, because Order 831 demands that resource-specific bids above 1,000 are cost justified. So, okay, that's my that's my speechy part. And now here come my questions. So first of all, I want to go to RDRR, and you guys want RDRR to be dispatched before storage. But RDRR, at least in California, is meant for California customers to deal with scarcity. So on August 16th, California did not have scarcity, right, within California borders. So we had, was 45,000 megawatts of load. We had sufficient resources. We did not call a Flex Alert. We did not call an EEA Watch. We did not call an EEA 1. We did not call an EEA 2 or an EEA 3. The issue was that our system was being pulled by exports. So should we, as Californians, dispatch RDRR to keep storage from exporting? Is that what you guys are asking here when you want RDRR to be dispatched before storage?
Well, Michelle, we're looking at the situation where if the operators feel that storage is being depleted too fast and they activate RRDR to get us through the peak, it doesn't make sense to continue depleting the batteries to not use RRDR.
Well, look, I think we shouldn't deplete the batteries to support low priority exports when we know we need them in California to meet our net peak. That I agree with.
Right, and we're trying to stay out of the export discussion, which is different. And my looking at the data on August 16 is different. That we were getting EIM transfers in, and the CAISO's reduction of the supply of batteries, the exceptional dispatch, drove up prices across the Western EIM because we were pulling in supply during the hour ending 17.
Well, my reading of that is that CAISO wanted to support the exports, so put large load conformance in the HASP that they then needed to retain in the FMM.
Right, yeah, there's another thing, yeah, later on they put in very large load conformance adjustments, which drove the price to 2,000, right, and that didn't have anything to do with batteries being depleted or market power or anything. It was just the CAISO put in a 4,000 megawatt load conformance.
Right. And that goes to one of my other points is like, if we do this and we allow batteries to sit at 2,000 during the net peak and CAISO uses high load conformance, why would we not expect FMM to go to 2,000?
Well, if we have enough supply, it won't. But I mean, if the CAISO operators put in astronomical numbers, none of this will matter. It'll go to 2,000 regardless of it,
Right. But they're putting in that either to prevent the exports or to bring in resources to support the exports. I'm trying to say that August 16th wasn't a tough day for us, right? We didn't need the batteries. In the end, we didn't, if you look at how many batteries we were using that day, nothing, because RTD went to nothing, right?
Yeah, I mean, later in the day it stopped, but they put in exceptional dispatch during hour ending 17 And because they thought the batteries were being drained too fast. I mean, it's
but then
difficult to go back and think through all the operators. You know, we tried to parse what was going on. It's hard to understand everything that was going through the operator's mind. And, you know, we agree that we should, you know, there's issues about the exports and the restrictions on transfers. Maybe the restrictions on transfers were part of the problem too. You know, that's why we support your suggestion that we discuss what the CAISO is going to do, and what the CAISO is going to do on restrictions of EIM transfers is wrapped up in exports and load conformance and all those things.
Yeah, okay. So just so my RDRR point is that I'm not sure that we want to use RDRR to prevent the discharge of batteries if the discharge is for exports, right? Because we want to save RDRR to serve California load during emergencies. And so that I'm a little troubled by that, right? So
Yeah, but the operators don't have to activate it to support exports. But the problem I have in mind is, suppose they activate it because we do need it to keep California's lights on. And then what we do is we drain the batteries anyway, when the reason they activate it is they're worried that we're going to get into the net load peak hours and we're going to have nothing left.
okay, but then also think about this. If you guys, if we support this proposal, batteries are going to be sitting at 2,000, but exports always sit at 2,300. So why are we not always exporting and draining the batteries, right? It seems like you need something else to do that.
But the exports, I mean, we explained this in the opinion because we thought it was important given the stakeholder discussion. But remember that the hourly exports affect passing the RSE, but ultimately, whether we dispatch to drain the batteries or the other resources is just dependent on whether our batteries offers are higher than the offers in the Western EIM. And it doesn't really matter what the hourly exports is. We're just going to drain our batteries
Right.
if they're held artificially low.
Yeah, but so the thing, I still have to get my mind around this, but the thing about the difference between California and the rest of the WEAM is that we have to offer everything in, even beyond our RSE. They do
Right.
not. And
Right.
so that's why that's why exports are going to pull on our system, because we'll have bids for resources we don't want to leave. We'll have our battery bids out there because they're flexible resources, even though we do not want them to go, right? We want to save them for the charge. But if exports can pull at a higher price than the batteries are, then it's still going to be a problem. We're still going to need to use exceptional dispatch.
Well, again, if the power flows out in the HASP, it backs down resources in the Western EIM that can be dispatched back up. If there aren't resources available in the Western EIM, we're a problem. And if we've got exports going out, it means there's not congestion. We can just pull them back. But, you know, I agree with you that I'm concerned about cheap exports.
Yeah,
And, you know, letting the price go up for the batteries will tend to at least raise the price of the exports if they're draining our batteries.
Okay, well, I guess I haven't really, I usually think about it not in terms of the EIM, but in terms of the intertie resources. And the thing is that we schedule them in HASP. We don't ever pull them back, right? We have to be in dire. No, we don't. We don't.
No, that's exactly what the operators are concerned about. They're concerned about that in the, you know, that we're supporting the exports with imports in WEAM, and we do pull the power back in import transfers, except, you know, in the binding interval in FMM when the operators block it. But it still comes back in RTD.
Right. So assuming that there's extra resources in the WEAM and we haven't blocked their transfers, yes, we can reverse the exports, but the intertie exports we never pull back, right?
Right, but
we believe that
they all sink in the WEAM though. I mean, right now, everybody that we're exporting to on the ties is in the Western EIM. So all we're doing is backing down resources elsewhere in the Western EIM, and then those resources can be dispatched. They're back down in the HASP, and then they're dispatched up as WEAM transfers. It'll be different, and we say this in the opinion, if the structure of the Western EIM changes and some of those entities are not part of the Western EIM, then we'll have to worry about, you know, HASP exports that go outside the Western EIM. But right now, virtually everybody we're exporting to is in the Western EIM. So it's just a schedule. They buy it, and it almost cancels out because they buy at the they clear in Hass, but then they buy at the FMM price and they're dispatched at the FMM price.
Okay, okay. I have to think about that anymore. So then you also say that you're not concerned about market power and the higher bid caps because of one, local market power mitigation. But local market power mitigation only applies if the system price isn't higher. But during stress system conditions, we would expect the system price to be higher, right? We
Right.
don't
But
have
then we
system
don't,
market power
then we
mitigation.
don't have local market power, right? We got lots of
System.
supply and the system is just tight.
Right, or we have system market power, which, because we have no mitigation for system market power. So you can't say that local market power mitigates system market power, right?
But we're
Don't
not
have-
convinced that we have system market power, and looking back at all the stuff in the CAISO reports, we don't see any problem. We don't see indications of problem with system market power, but we do see instances of, local market power causing resources to be prematurely dispatched.
Okay,
And we'd
but-
like more data on this. I
okay,
think that's something we should work on in the future.
okay. Then the second point was that you don't need to worry about the higher bid caps and potentially system market power because the storage resources have binding IFM schedules. But if you look at the data, plenty of storage resources bid at the cap, so they don't necessarily have binding schedules, right?
Yeah, it'd be good to know more about those resources bidding at the cap, and that's one reason why we were not so enthusiastic about raising the cap in the day-ahead market. But
Okay.
the council's been changing its rules on a lot of this stuff, and some of those people may have been bidding at the cap because the CAISO wasn't counting their regulation schedules as using state of charge, so they're trying to preserve some. We need to understand what's going on. There are reasons why people might have been doing that, and we don't know, but we're cautious about wanting to change the IFM because we'd rather have them getting IFM schedules.
Okay, got it. And then, so another thing you said is that don't worry about system market power because if you look at the battery fleet, only a small portion we're offering at the cap, but that doesn't mean that behavior might not change in response to what we're doing here, right? And also, those weren't, I'm getting back to my point, those weren't stress system days for California, right? August 16th was not a day that was stressed for California. So looking at the distribution of the bids on August 16th doesn't really help us because that was a 45,000 megawatt day, not a 50,000 or 52,000 megawatt day like September of 2022, right? So
But we are part of the Western EIM. We don't want to drain our batteries to keep prices low during the afternoon in Arizona and then shed load in California at 8:30, right?
I totally agree. And I like the idea of opportunity cost. As I went back to my first point, my concern is that they aren't real opportunity costs during the stress period, 4 to 9 p.m., which is the time that it seems more likely that the resources could sit at 2,000 and potentially cost us 2,000, right? So yeah, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have opportunity costs that are high to keep the batteries. I'm just saying, if you look at the bids, they're not going to do it for us, right? Because there's a distribution of bids. So we're going to have to use exceptional dispatch anyway. And then not only that, we potentially distort the market when we care from 4 to 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
We talked about some of the things that are unclear about, there's references in the summer reports to some of the resources that hit the ancillary service constraint in those hours, which means they're completely tapped out. And anything they got dispatched for energy, they just get charged again because they're at the ancillary service constraint. So, there's things that the CAISO could tell us more about, what's behind those high offer prices that would inform discussion, and maybe, we can make some fine tuning adjustments. We've argued orally in old statements about, state of charge dependent offers would simplify things a lot, because then we could allow high offer prices for resources whose state of charge is low.
Yeah.
And we know that people with the high offer prices were people that were in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's our view. We want the people who are in trouble to have high offer prices, but we don't want someone who's got market power to have high offer prices.
Right. Okay. I think I can agree with that.
Michelle, just a second. We've been having a dialogue.
I know, I'm
We've-
sorry. I'll stop now.
And-
Okay. I will open up the lines. I'll come back.
Oh.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and let me. I just like to say, hold on, Michelle, just for a second. But yeah, I was just going to jump in with a couple comments at the end. So I think it's a fine line between saying we don't want to use our batteries up to support exports if we're not if we don't have when we have a reliability issue, and then we keep going back to the 16th and saying, well, it wasn't really a problem for California, but it was a problem elsewhere. And so what we also don't want to do is prevent batteries from being used to support scarcity elsewhere in the EIM just to keep prices low inside California. And so if I think exports are okay if having prices rise inside California is also appropriate.
And I
if
don't disagree.
It's needed elsewhere.
I don't disagree. But the
Okay.
other balancing authorities have the ability to not put their bids in. We don't have that ability. Like, I would love a little buffer, right? But we can't do that. We have a must offer for all of our resources, even if we think we might need them later in the day. So
Right, and
I don't disagree with you. I just
Okay.
say, and then this goes to my question about hydro. But I've got lots of others, so I'm going to let somebody else go though. Thank you.
Okay, and then I just want to say I believe, you guys can correct me, that the words "don't worry about system market power" do not appear in our opinion. We don't say that. The way I would characterize it is, yes, it's a potential problem that we are not aware of any kind of concrete analysis about how systematic or severe it is. We've kind of gone through this in the questions of whether we should have system level market power mitigation. And like all mitigation, it's this trade-off between how big is this potential problem of market power versus the sort of knock-on effects of how the mitigation might distort other things. And we have here examples of how bid caps seem to have caused issues on certain days. It's not holistic, but it is evidence of specific problems on specific days. And at least to my knowledge, we don't there's a couple bids at high prices that we're not sure exactly what was going on with those. But on balance, again, it's sort of this question of what the potential risk of system market power is, which is kind of less concrete at this point than these examples of storage depletion that has been problematic. And maybe there's other solutions, but those don't seem to be either well designed or perhaps not working. And so I wouldn't say we're not worried about it. I would say on balance, we're more worried about the depletion of storage than we are about the questions of system market power at this point.
Okay. Well, I'll think about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. So the next person in line is Doug Bognoni.
Hi, Doug Boccignone for the Bay Area Municipal Transmission Group. Thank you for
Spent 6 months in Italy and still can't pronounce.
No, there's the hard C and the soft C, and always get that wrong.
When
Sorry,
I lived
Doug.
in Italy, I never once had to spell my name. It was great. Thank you for the comprehensive opinion. I think you covered a lot of ground, and it provides a really good discussion of the issues. I wanted to comment on 3 elements of the opinion. The first is related to the day-ahead market and whether there's a need to implement the same caps for the energy limited resources in the day-ahead market as real time. I completely support the view that the opinion expresses that it's not necessary and shouldn't be done absent better explanation for the need. And the only explanation I have heard is the one that Alva sort of touched on, which is if you don't have consistency between the day-ahead and real-time markets, there may be some problems, additional deviations created by that create a problem for these use limited resources. And I just disagree with that idea because, as you explained in the opinion, the opportunity costs are determined by the running of the IFM, and therefore there is no need to raise these offer caps for these resources because the IFM does it the right way. And I don't think it's sufficient justification to just say, oh, well, not having the same cap in real time, I mean, in day ahead as real time is going to create a problem. You know, if there's virtual bids that are affecting the day ahead prices, that'll be reflected in the day ahead results, and the opportunity cost will be captured. So I guess my I don't know if it's an ask, but it seems to me that you've already come to the conclusion that that justification that's in the ISO's paper or straw proposal or draft final proposal isn't sufficient justification for imposing this rule in the day ahead market. Is that interpretation correct? That more is needed?
I'd say we're not convinced by that argument. It's not completely implausible. Everything else being equal, perhaps it'd be good to be consistent, but we find that they're just the day ahead is a different beast. As you point out, because of how opportunity costs are calculated, and it's an additional complication for this year that we would rather have discussed when there's more time to discuss it in a subsequent year. Scott, were you going to say something?
No, that's fine. I mean, I just gonna, when a lot of the discussion of the CAISO and others was about that somehow opportunity costs weren't going to be reflected unless we allowed them to bid high, and that's what we were explaining is not true. And if people, and the prices can go higher if in the IFM without the batteries submitting a high bid. You know, that was the example I talked through of suppose there's an $1,800 import bid at $1,900. Well, that can set the opportunity cost of batteries and the price can go to $1,900. The batteries don't have to guess that there'll be a bid coming in that's needed and clear at $1,800 and now we're in 19 or 20. You know, that gets solved in the IFM. So seems to us that the opportunity cost issue is a misunderstanding, and the IFM does take account of that. If you think the whole IFM is clearing too low, you know, then you can submit your virtual bids and put your dollars where your mouth is.
So the short answer is that we were not convinced, Doug.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I agree completely. My other comment, you touched briefly in the opinion about self-scheduling, one of the other alternatives, and it was just a very brief statement expressing or making the point that there's no guarantee that the self-schedules would result in, you know, enough energy during this net load peak being held in or being in the batteries. But I think if you were self-scheduling both the charging and the discharging, that's the most likely way to ensure that you have sufficient energy in the resource. It seemed to me that maybe the assumption in the opinion is you would only be self-scheduling the discharging.
Well, if you self-scheduled the charging, but then you were dispatched, it would still net out to you didn't get all that energy in, right?
Well, but if you're self-scheduling the charging, you're saying, I'm willing to pay the highest price to charge. So I think you're the least likely to get dispatched to discharge with a self-scheduled charging.
The dispatch offer is different, but I mean, I don't think you can submit an offer to charge at 1,000 and discharge at 400, can you?
No, but if you have a self-scheduled to charge, you're basically saying, I'll charge at any price. So there is essentially no discharge schedule. I guess my point is, I think that the self-scheduling would be the most likely to get the shape right. I think it still creates the same problems you point out with related to the end of hour state of charge, though, or similar. One
Right.
is that, you know, it's not a bid, so it's not meeting the flex RA requirements, which would need to be
Exactly.
changed. And I think the second one is, this is more of a question, would it create the same issue where you're effectively, you know, at the limit, so you're you know, it's going to be setting the prices at those high levels anyway, because you're saying I'm going to charge at any price or I'm going to discharge at any price, depending on which hour.
I think that's the risk that some of the battery operators talked about, Doug, in our last meeting about this, that they if they use that end of hour state of charge, or if you use this charging self-schedule, you're guessing that there's going to be a lot of solar output, and you're guessing that there's going to be enough for you to charge without paying $2,000, but you don't know that, and you can ruin your whole day by buying a bunch of power at 2,000 that you're going to have to sell later at a lower price.
Right, but if those are the same hour intervals where you had a day ahead award for charging and same for discharging, it wouldn't matter what the price was, because they would, you know, just wash out. It's only if there's deviations between the day and real time in those charging and discharging schedules.
Yeah, but I mean, you still, now you're walking another knife edge for the people, that they're going to have the hours where, all these hours where they're going to self-schedule charging, and then the other hours where they're going to self-schedule discharging. But I don't think that's the way it works. Is there's going to be a break point of hours where you don't want to be doing either. You want to be preserving your state of charge unless something unexpected happens.
Yeah,
and that's really where they were likely to have this above $1,000 price kick in those hours,
gotcha.
those transition hours, and in the hours when we actually get into the net load peak.
Yeah, and then you get to this end of hour state of charge tool, but then that raises all the issues you pointed out in the paper.
Right.
So thank you for that. And then just my last comment is related to the longer term solution. And you point out several things to take into consideration to do a better job of capturing the opportunity costs. And it seems to me that those are really good ideas, but also complicated. And I think if we're going to start considering more complicated approaches in these long-term solutions, we should also fully explore ways to do a better job of having a longer look ahead in the real-time market, which is also, you know, complicated, but would, if we could make it work, would make a lot of these problems go away.
Right. But it's not trivial. I mean, I work with the Ontario ISO, which has a lot of hydro and cascade hydro and energy limited hydro. They feel the need to look out, and they built a tool that looks out to the end of the day called ERUC. But I mean, in order to make it solve, it has to solve in hourly increments. And even then, they had to put in some additional restrictions. You're on beyond the bleeding edge of what's technologically feasible. So we don't have unrealistic expectations that we can run a 5-minute dispatch all day, or even a 15-minute dispatch all day. So, you know, we're going to have to make some compromises, and
But I fully recognize that, but I guess what I'm getting at is, I think including in the suite of things that we consider for potential solutions ought to be something like that, and, you know, running an hourly look ahead for multiple hours within the day, because which is itself complicated, but maybe, you know, gives a better answer, better solution, and isn't all that more complicated than some of these other things that you identified in the paper once we dig into them.
right, that's what we're saying. You know, there are lots of things, and you know, some ISOs are looking at very short offer price changes for storage resources, and that would cause a lot of heartburn for the CAISO market design. But you know, other ISOs are thinking about that or doing it. So you know, there are lots of things. We didn't want to go into all that stuff in this opinion. We touched on some things that we think are really important. You know, like that's the problem, that our offers don't change with the declining state of charge. And one way to do that is have state of charge dependent offers. Another way is to allow people to charge their offers every 5 minutes or 15 minutes, you know. But think changing their offers every 5 or 15 minutes is going to be a bigger problem for the CAISO than having stated charge dependent offers, but that's something to be talked through in a stakeholders process.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Sure. So yeah, thanks, Doug. And of course, we all know that the ISO did consider going to 15-minute intervals in the day-ahead market a handful of years ago, and then found that the computational issues were, as you point out, were just too much. Regarding the longer time horizons, there are two issues. One is extending the time horizon, essentially creating that. Getting around the issue of not capturing the value of energy later, but there's also the issue of whether you have binding intervals later on, creating a true intraday market rather than just advisory intervals. Those are two intertwined issues. If it was computationally possible to have intraday markets with binding intervals further out, as well as the longer time horizon, that would in theory take care of a lot of these problems. But you're absolutely right about the computational challenges. But what was not possible 20 years ago is now very possible today, and so it's I think it's not too early to start thinking about where we might like to head. Hopefully we will have improved computational capabilities in the future. Okay, thank you, Doug. We have in the phone line, we have Kyle Navis or Navis. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name too.
No worries. It's actually Navis, which maybe is even worse.
Navis. Okay.
Anyway. Yeah, so my name is Kyle Navis. I represent Public Advocates Office here at the CPUC, or Cal Advocates. So I'm just going to read a quick statement and then happy to respond to questions. So first, I want to say that Cal Advocates agrees that the problem statement guiding this initiative is a valid concern that needs to be addressed. At this particular point, our fundamental overarching concern is that the expedited interim solution for summer 2024 has been too rushed and is not ready for adoption and creates significant cost risks. And we see at least 3 areas that present substantial cost risk to ratepayers that, from our perspective, have not had sufficient evaluation. So first, after reviewing the MSC draft opinion, we remain skeptical that allowing storage to bid above the soft offer cap is unlikely to increase the wholesale price of energy, and we would prefer to see a more robust study done to alleviate this concern. The second issue is that while the MSC opinion concludes that there's no need to extend the bid cap increase to the day-ahead market, and we agree with that, the draft final proposal does exactly that. Nonetheless, the impacts to the day-ahead market have not been considered. And then the third issue is one that has not been considered in any working group proposal, and it's not touched in the MSC opinion either. So we see a risk of adverse market interactions with the potential dispatch of Strategic Reliability Reserve, or SRR, resources, which can introduce improper bid stack outcomes and attendant GHG emissions. And at 3 gigawatts, SRR dispatch can reduce storage resources intraday opportunity costs, increasing the efficiency of early storage dispatch ahead of SRR resources market availability hours. So we urge the MSC today to consider all of the possible risks to ratepayers before endorsing this proposal. And given the lack of sufficient evaluation or even consideration of the risks we described, and given that the CAISO has stated on multiple occasions that it has adequate tools to manage the grid reliably for summer 2024, we think it would be imprudent and pose costly risks to ratepayers in both the CAISO and WEEM market footprints to move ahead with the current solution. And to be clear, our position is that the CAISO should delay adoption of a solution until 2025 to ensure that stakeholders can properly develop and evaluate solutions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. I think as you and other commenters have pointed out that there's definitely uncertainty in terms of both the risk and the benefit side. That we don't know for sure that average prices would not be affected in an adverse direction. We think that greater efficiency in the use of storage will lower market costs and likely and have a good chance of lowering prices, but we don't know that for sure. We don't have perhaps we don't have a robust analysis say that we're definitely convinced of that. But there's also the risk on the other side that if we don't give more tools to manage real-time state of charge through offering, that will continue to see problems that we've seen and that have been documented by the ISO, and we've documented in our section 3 of early discharge of resources and running out of storage at times that we truly needed. We might get through the summer, as Scott said. We might have ample hydro, and it might be a cool summer, or we might not. But we think it's that the risk on that one, on the reliability side, is important enough that the possibility of prices going in an adverse direction, we think is less of a risk than the reliability risk that we're trying to avoid by giving more tools to manage state of charge. But there's uncertainty on both sides, and this is inevitably going to be a balance of those. And Scott or Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I'll just add, thanks for the comment about the SRR. I want to look into that more. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the takeaway lesson is there, other than we need to rethink, or the SRR raises a lot of potential issues.
Right, and that's something we want to flag here. Having an additional 3 gigawatts potentially on top would assuage potentially some of the reliability concerns that have been expressed here. And so,
yeah, but it might exacerbate some of the market concerns as well. So I have to think through that.
Right.
And, the operators will take that into account. If they think the SSRs can be triggered, then they wouldn't raise their bids to preserve the state of charge. But, there is this information problem. If nobody knows what's going to be done with the strategic reserve, it causes mistakes that maybe we'll drain when we shouldn't have drained, or we won't drain when we should have drained. There's a coordination issue. I don't think it changes the problem, but it complicates coordination for the CAISO and everybody else.
Right. And, last thing I'll just say is that the current forecasts are pointing to a hot summer in the Western Interconnection, especially outside of California. So I think that's part of why we're looking for a bar of assurance that's a little bit higher than will not necessarily be an outcome. So anyway, thanks for hearing out our concerns.
Let's see. Danny Johnson of the ISO, maybe you'd like to comment a little bit on SRR contracts and how they might be interacting with at least the day-ahead markets and the formation of expectations for prices.
Yeah, sure, Ben. So currently they would be bidding and participating in our day-ahead market, and I think that they would be bidding in their marginal costs. So the CAISO is putting in coordination plans and procedures in place to work with these resources to get them online, going into potential emergency events. And then once they're online, they would be participating as a traditional resource.
Not to take us off the topic, but I don't know how it's a strategic reserve if it's bidding in at marginal cost. And I also don't know why we needed a strategic reserve instead of an RMR contract, which bids in at marginal cost. But that's a whole other set of topics.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay. Let's see. Anybody else? Anybody else in the phone lines? Yep, I see that Michelle would like to make another comment.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just figured since no one else was, I would take this opportunity. So,
Sure.
I wanted to talk for a second about Northwest Hydro. So, a bunch of questions, which I didn't get to before. So first of all, why do we think that they can't just base schedule their hydro if they're worried about premature inter-day discharge of the hydro resources?
Because they don't have to bid in real time. They could just base it and then they know how it'll be scheduled. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, if it's in the base schedule, it's going to be dispatched. I mean, that's not something that's going to use it up if they base schedule it and put it in at a low price.
Right, but we're talking about stress system conditions across the West. Shouldn't they have to serve their own load during
Right,
stress system
they
conditions?
should, but the question is how much do they want to export and how much of their,
Zero. They want to export zero, so they base schedule their resource to cover their own load.
well, I mean, there's still the question of the supply above we want them to offer their supply above what's required to cover their load, right?
Yeah. I mean,
They're not going to do that if the price is $1.28.
Look, I told you have enough to cover your own load during the day and the evening. You surely dispatch it at 3 p.m. because you have load at 7 p.m. You have the ability to base schedule it at 3 p.m. so you have enough at 6 p.m. Why is that not a solution to address the reliability concern during stress system conditions on those 3 days or 4 days that we need it?
I think you're saying they withhold all output except that what's needed to cover their load, and they don't offer any of the flexible capacity they're supposed to offer. I mean, that's part of the issue. Is it just like the CAISO, we're supposed to supply some in addition to our base.
Yeah, but the thing is, we have but we do. We offer everything. They don't have that obligation. And so if we're talking about those 4 days and they're worried about reliability, so the thing is, why do they sit at 1600? Because they don't want to dispatch, right? So you can just as easily accomplish that. Do they not want to dispatch to meet their own load and therefore lean on other areas that are similarly in trouble? Or do they don't want to dispatch because they want to save it for themselves later on? In which case they can base schedule it.
Michelle, I think the whole idea of the Western EIM and maintaining reliability is that the areas that are in real trouble will offer their supply, the supply that they need to conserve at a higher offer price. They can meet their load with it if they need to. But that if there's cheap supply somewhere else,
so
the cheap supply will be used. And that benefits California too.
Right, but we don't think that there's a problem at 3 p.m. We don't need the extra. They can base schedule it and save it and sell the extra at 6 p.m.
But if it's hydro, if they use it at 3 p.m., it's not available later. And you look at
They base schedule
in
it
the cold spell, the price was $1,000 all day. BPA was in a state of emergency all through the night.
Right, so they base schedule so that they have sufficient resources to cover their load, right?
But they want to only use what they need to, and they want to import and choose. They're willing to pay a lot to, import supply to solve their problem if they can.
But that suggests that they're leaning. That suggests that they aren't.
No, that's the whole idea of the Western EIM, that we get benefits from trade by, if someone's in real trouble, they're going to back down their hydro if there's cheaper supply somewhere else.
No,
and that's because the CAISO too.
Yes, but if they're trying to bid their way out of providing their own load, they're leaning on other people throughout the day. So if we're talking, I thought what we were talking about was intraday opportunity costs, right? I want to save my charge to serve my load later in the day. But what you're saying is they don't want to use their storage resources because they don't have enough to meet their load at all, which is an entirely different thing.
They don't know if they're going to have enough load. Just like the CAISO, we still import when we have enough to meet our load, but we still import to do it more efficiently, right? That's the idea of the Western EIM. And no one knows for sure at 3 p.m. what's going to happen at 7. So you want to.
And if that's the case, and then if that's, okay. But to answer my question, assuming everyone has sufficient resources, why can't they just base schedule it to address reliability? On those 4 days when
we could abolish the Western EIM and everybody could dispatch their own balancing area by themselves and meet their load with their resources.
Well, they may already be doing that, except for California. That's my point.
I think everybody in the West, I think a lot of, you look at the data, I think a lot of entities in the Western EIM are exporting or importing over the day. And I think that's the idea.
Yeah, I totally agree. But what we're addressing here is the reliability risk that they have identified that they want to address. And I'm trying to say, are there other less intrusive means of doing that on those 4 days that we're concerned about? And I think the answer is yes.
I guess I wouldn't agree that it's less intrusive. It seems like a blunt instrument to, you want to sort of have them basically withhold any excess supply during all of the hours in the lead up.
Right, but I'm sorry, but Scott is arguing that they don't have any excess supply.
One possibility he was, but I think also
Saying they're conserving, not that they necessarily know they're going to shed load, just as we didn't know it, on the days we've had trouble.
yeah, and we don't know we don't need it at 3 p.m. either. So maybe we'd like to import that expensive Northwestern hydro to charge the batteries. I think Danny wanted to jump in on this. Or maybe not.
Oh, no, yeah, I wanted to try to add a little bit of context to the base scheduling discussion. To pass the EDM RSC, it's not just meet your load, it's meet your load plus an upward uncertainty requirement, which is set to 95%. So I think the argument would be that they would want to accurately represent the cost and the opportunity cost of that hydro that they are offering into the market above what they need to explicitly meet their demand forecast to make sure it's not outflowing and causing future reliability issues.
I'm sorry, I don't get it. If they don't, they want to, how much is the
So-
requirement over and above their load?
You're saying they can't self-schedule up to 100% of their demand. They have to have at least 5% of it flexible.
They have to have, they could self-schedule it in to meet the requirement, but they have to make available in excess of just their demand forecast. They have to meet demand forecast plus upward uncertainty, which may or may not materialize, especially at those high confidence intervals.
The 95% is a risk characterization rather than 95% of the megawatts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I think we're just going to agree to disagree here, but what about the fact that exports in the WEAM can, if we're in tight situations and the hydro is at 1600, can't other areas still export them given that their penalty parameter is at 2300?
Yes. With
Okay,
the structure of the
That's how the
scheduling on
dispatch
penalty
would work.
prices, yes.
So it doesn't solve the problem. That's my point. If it's
I'm sorry, I don't follow that, Michelle. I mean, the HASPs can help you meet your RSE, and there are issues with whether that RSE calculation in the HASP and exports is right. We went around on that a couple of years ago, and we can go around on it again. We're always ready to spend more ink on how the RSE should be done, but we're focusing on the draining of the batteries.
I'm focusing on hydro right now, so I'm getting
Okay,
to,
hydro gets drained in RTD too.
and that's the 5-minute market is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay. Does it really get drained when CAISO puts load conformance of 4,000 in the FMM and then reduces it to 1,000 in RTD?
No, we talk about that in the opinion, that just drives up the price in FMM. So load conformance that's way out of line is expensive, especially if you also put in import restrictions on EM transfers. It makes it more expensive. So those things need to be talked about in point. But when we're focusing on, are we draining the hydro? Are we draining the batteries? We should look at what's happening in RTD, because that's the actual physical schedules that cause water to flow or batteries to be drained.
Okay, well then when I look at August 16th, I guess I'm seeing no RTD problem.
Well, RTD problem during our ending 19 when they put in the 4,000 megawatt FMM adjustment. But in our ending 17, you'll see that the price went to $1,000 in the CAISO and Eastern EIM in RTD. And it did not go that high in FMM. And one conjecture we talk about in the opinion is the reason that is because the CAISO put in end of hour constraints shortly before 1600, so they weren't reflected in the FMM intervals, and then they were reflected in RTD. So RTD didn't have enough supply to meet load.
But I'm talking about hydro, so I'm going back to hydro.
Well, it
and
could be the
seeing-
same for hydro. You know, it could be the same for hydro, that hydro could get, you could have, but there is no,
Right,
there is
but
no
if,
end of hour constraint for hydro, so that can't
right,
happen.
but if it's because of export, somebody else needing it, then exports go in at 20.
We're importing in the Western EIM transfers on August 16, but they might have been capped during some of these hours by the EIM transfer rule. And you know, it's hard to
Right, but
parse.
hydro was concerned about discharging too early, right?
Right.
But if exports, self-scheduled exports, of which there were 10,000 in the CAISO market, right, that potentially pull on those hydro resources, it doesn't, going up to 1600 doesn't help them, right? Because they're
Yes.
still going to.
Well, it depends on what the prices are, not in HASS, but in RTD. If they buy the power at $2,000 in HASS, but then their actual resources are offered at $1,200, then they will have bought at $2,000 and sell back at $1,200.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get at, the Northwest said that the issue was premature discharge of the hydro, and going to 1600 doesn't, going from 1,000 to 1600 doesn't help them if the reason is because people want to pull on them for exports, for self-scheduled exports, which is how people participate in our hourly market.
That's not in the EIM. The EIM, there are no self-scheduled exports. We have resources being dispatched based on EIM bids and offers, and we're talking about changing those bids and offers. So if the hydro was offered at 1,200 and other resources were offered at 1,100, the hydro would not be dispatched and the other resources would be dispatched up in RTD, and it would not matter.
Okay, so now,
what
okay,
happened in
thank
HASS.
you. That's really helpful. So that then brings me back to the problem of if the FMM, if as a result of this policy, the FMM goes high and the RTD goes low, then California is going to be paying a lot for this. And hydro is going to be the recipient of that, right? Because they'll be bidding it at 1600, not at 1,000. And if CAISO continues to use load conformance in the FMM and not the RTD, this will exacerbate this problem.
I don't know if it'll exacerbate the problem, but if they continue to, high load conformance in FMM and low load conformance in RTD means buying in FMM and selling back at RTD prices. So if they're different, that'll be expensive.
Yeah, and now we're at 1,000, and now for the Northwest Hydro, and then it'll be 1,600. So it does seem like a problematic thing if we aren't discussing the load conformance factor and the
But I mean,
transfers.
on August 16th, everything was capped at 1,000, and we still bought it at 2,000 in FMM and sold it back at $120 or something in RTD. And we had the caps in effect.
And that was because, okay, so then just one more point and then I'll leave you guys alone. So my final point is that the reason that we increased the cap from 1,000 to 2,000 was because of those bilateral indices that are thinly traded and that separate from California. And I think that those $1,000 bilateral indices go to 1,000 because, not because they, I mean, they're so small, the transactions, they're 25 megawatts. You're not buying it for the 16-hour strip. You're buying it for those peak hours when our prices, our 4-hour price went to 1,000, right? In the day ahead market. But so then they buy on the bilateral market, and then we shape that bilateral price using our shape, and you can see that the price separation is extraordinary. And then we then let that affect our entire market. So it's not clear that our market should have gone to 2,000, but that's my final point. I'll just leave it at that. So it's sort of like the tail wagging the dog. So thank you guys for the discussion. I really appreciate it.
I see Kyle. I think you got back in line. Is that correct? And would you like to make another question or comment?
No, actually, I'm not sure why that happened. Apologies.
Oh, okay. All right. We have nobody else in queue, let me just remind you about that you can get in queue if you have a question or comment at this time. If not, we will proceed to considering the adoption of the opinion. Okay, I don't see anybody else. Is that correct? Ahmed, there's nobody else in line.
There are no more questions, but to enter the question queue, just as a reminder, you can click the WebEx raise hand icon located on the lower right of the participant panel. For those who are dialed in, just dial *3 to enter the queue, and you'll hear a beep tone when you are unmuted. It doesn't seem like we have anybody on the phone line right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time, Ben, but I believe Kaiso could make some comments about the sufficiency of exceptional dispatch current tools.
That would certainly be useful. We have until the top of the hour. It won't. I don't anticipate it would take long to adopt the opinion. So if
If anybody's got
Danny
anything to say
or-
about exceptional dispatch, speak now or forever hold your.
You can tell us about it later.
Yeah.
or Danny, Guillermo, or Sylvie.
Yeah,
I think Guillermo had planned to speak to it and his hand is raised, so he may be trying to get off mute.
Okay. I'm looking for. Oh, okay. I do see the hand raised. So, and Danny, you also have yours. So, Guillermo, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And just an additional detail to the discussion of the exceptional dispatches, because I think it's relevant in context. The first one is that the discussion was right that we used exceptional dispatches for storage resources in the previous summer. I want to highlight, however, that these were standard exceptional dispatches. These were not dispatches based on the more sophisticated tool that we have been working on developing for this summer. This summer is when we're going to start using that tool that has no different logic in the market, but is relying on more sophisticated logic outside the market to define and build the trajectories of how the storage resources need to be exceptional dispatch in the market. That is the difference relative to the previous summer. Indeed, we use that tool to position resources given the last eclipse in April. But again, last year was just standard exceptional dispatches. It could be set to a fixed value. It could be set to a maximum not exceedance level. And for this summer, the expectation is that this new tool is going to provide operators with the ability to define what the trajectory should be for different resources when they have a specific need to hold certain level of state of charge. And the tool is to give them the pool of resources and what trajectory they have to follow, and that is going to transpire now into the market. The tools that are in the market continue to be the standard tools of basically setting the dispatch operating target to a specific value or to not exceed certain value. Thank you.
If they set it to not exceed a certain value, that'll be enforced at a penalty price of 1,000 or 2,000, right, Guillermo?
Correct. The way we mathematically model that in the market process is that we use penalty prices, and they have a specific penalty prices high enough in the scaling run, and they are pegged to the bid cap in the pricing run.
Right.
Okay, so we've clarified that it was not in use last August. And it sounds
No,
like
but the end of our state of charge was in use, and it has exactly the same effect.
Oh, okay. So the penalty price was used to enforce that end of our state of charge even last year.
Yeah. That's discussed in the August report.
Yeah.
And in the DMM.
that option was not frequently chosen by the resource owners.
This is not the
operators.
resource, this is the CAISO operator. That's the problem. We got two end of state. This is the CAISO
okay.
operator end of our state of charge.
So it was the resources option and end of our state of charge that wasn't used very often.
Right.
Okay.
I think we were told the CAISO wasn't going to use the end of our state of charge, but they ended up using it on August 16th. So we don't know how much they used it overall, probably not very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jim, for the suggestion. We ask staff about that. Jim or Scott, anything else you want to say before we go to vote on the opinion?
I'm ready to move the opinion.
Should we take that as a
let's
as a
let's
move?
have a formal let's do this according to the rules, and so I need a formal motion for adopting the opinion on Order 831 rules for bidding above the soft offer cap. Do I have a motion to accept the opinion?
I move to accept.
I second.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the opinion. Before we go to a vote, I'll ask if there are any modifications, corrections, anything else that anybody would like to suggest.
Not from Scott.
Not at this point.
Not at this point. Okay, I'm sure somewhere there is
Yeah,
a
somewhere
misspelling
somebody
in-
might find something we'll want to revise, but yeah.
Right, and it will be preserved. That error will be preserved forever, sadly. So, okay, let's move to the vote then. It's been moved and seconded, and so Scott, your vote.
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So it's been unanimously voted in favor of adopting the opinion. And so the final opinion will be posted, and then we'll be talking about it before the boards. So, okay, so at this point, if there's is there any further business, anybody? I don't
I see
think
Michelle in the queue.
Well, oh yeah.
Sorry, guys. Just one more point. So you guys were talking about the new exceptional dispatch function, and Scott was raising the idea that we're now going to have to pay at the bid cap. But I would note that now the bid cap will be going to 2,000 for the entire day under this new proposal, because it's not just because if there's a maximum import bid price for the 4 hours, storage can opportunity cost bid, which means the bid cap is the penalty prices are going to go to 2,000 for the entire day, meaning that exceptional dispatch under this proposal will be more expensive. So I just want to make that note. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that, so accepting your point with the qualification that this proposal, there were already a lot of other channels in which the penalty price would kick up to 2,000 based on import bids or virtual bids or other things.
No,
And
that's not true. No, there's only two ways for the bid price to go up. One is a cost verified bid, and the second is the maximum import bid price, right?
Yeah, so but if the maximum import bid price allowed those bids, they wouldn't necessarily have to come from storage resources or hydro resources for
Right.
that.
But the
trigger.
maximum import bid price is usually confined to a 4-hour period. I'm saying now exceptional dispatch throughout the entire day will need to be paid at the $2,000 price, whereas if we didn't change it, it would be paid at $1,000 price. That's my only point. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle, for that clarification.
Can I provide
Okay.
a further clarification on that comment, please?
Yeah.
Sure, Guillermo, go ahead.
Yes, I don't think that is a correct statement from Michelle, because the penalty prices that we use for exceptional dispatches is to protect the range of operation of the exceptional dispatch, effectively to not dispatch the resource in the uneconomical zone. So And when we use the penalty prices, it's precisely just to ensure that they are out of the range of the economical dispatches. There will be other bids that are going to be used to meet the condition of the market, and the exceptional dispatch, the only thing that is doing is putting far away the resource under the exceptional dispatch to not be dispatched. It's not to set the price.
Okay, yeah, what you're saying is that $1,000 is relevant to the price only if the software winds up dispatching it in the prohibited zone. The system conditions are such that needs to be done, and then the price would pop to 1,000. Just because you're doing exceptional dispatch, of course, does not mean that the prices will be $1,000.
I think Michelle's comment was about load conformance, driving it to, large load conformances can drive it to the price cap. And if we withhold too much in the exceptional dispatch, that can also cause it to go high. But that won't be because of load conformance. Load conformance will blow through everything, no matter what the offer price is, and set it at 1,000 or 2,000. But too much exceptional dispatch, if they miscalculate what solar or wind is going to be, it can drive the price up, because everything we ED is at the cap.
No, I think this discussion was about when and if and how ED could trigger prices to the penalty prices. And I guess Guillermo's qualification now makes me a little so it sounds like only if it's actually dispatched into the zone that kind of violates where you were trying to go will that hit into the penalty price. And Michelle's point was that penalty price will now be $2,000 rather than $1,000 during these 831 periods, although the degree to which this proposal changes that will also interact with how much other resources might have done it otherwise anyways.
Right.
Okay, since we're just about the top of the hour, I would like to conclude the call on time and thank everybody. We don't have another public meeting yet scheduled, but I'm sure there'll be something soon. There are a lot of important issues coming up, and some of which were raised by the stakeholders in the conversations today. So looking forward to talking about that with you, and perhaps seeing some of you at the board meeting next week. So Ahmed, we can now end the call.
Perfect. All right, thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.